On previous videos, we have looked at several different ways of painting camouflage schemes on your miniature models. And on one of these videos, down in the comments section, MW asked if we could do an urban camouflage scheme. Well, but this is how I turn this into this. Now, I appreciate you're a busy person, so I've put chapters in, so if you are just interested in the recipe for urban digi camouflage, then you can jump straight to that, and then go back and watch it as many times as you like. But if you want to see the whole process of how I painted this Space Marine Scout Sergeant, then stick around and let's get going. Now, this Space Marine Scout Sergeant, I'm actually going to paint for my son. Now, he has been creating his own successor chapter, and he's been doing them largely in a black power armour. Now, I've been trying out different ways to paint black armour for a little while, and what I found is that often one of the best ways to do it is to not paint it black, but start off with a grey, a very dark grey base, and then build in some bluey sort of tones later on. Now, of course, if you already have a very dark grey, you can just use that. As I don't have a dark grey that is dark enough for what I want, I want to mix it up on the wet palette. Now, with this first coat, you don't need to be too accurate and too precise, because subsequent layers will help tidy it up. Now, one benefit of using dark grey as opposed to pure black is that you have somewhere to go with the shadows. And all you need to do is simply build a little bit more black into that grey mix and then work it into your paint scheme. So the next piece I'm going to work on is the face. Now, of course, you can use pre-mixed skin tones, but I'm going to try and mix my own, and it's a lot simpler than it sounds. So all you need is yellow, red, a little bit of blue, and black and white. So for starters, I want quite a dark skin tone, and then I'll build up to the highlights. So therefore, I'm going to mix the red with a little bit of yellow, a little dash of blue, and then add some white to bring it down into that skin tone colour. Now, even though the face of this mini is not much bigger than the size of the head of a matchstick, I'm going to try and paint it as carefully as I can. Now, if you do want to learn more about the theory of painting faces on a larger scale and then use those same principles on a smaller scale like we are here, then I've done a whole video on that, and I'll put a link down in the description for you. So I'm going to use like a beigey sandy colour for the trousers, but I don't want them to be looking too clean and shiny. So I'm going to add a little bit of green into that mix, and that will also help to add the shadows in there as well. So the next step is to paint the weapon and the scope. So for this, I'm going to use a dark grey and simply paint the entire thing. Now, I could paint the Aquila on his chest a nice bright yellow, but it kind of goes against the whole sneaky beaky camouflage scheme. So therefore, I'm going to go for the more tactical low vis version. So as he's wearing black armour, I'm going to go for a light grey motif across his chest. The next step is going onto the belt and also onto his gauntlets or gloves. So the base colour for this, I'm going to use a very, very dark brown. Now, the lenses, both on the NVGs on his head and also on his scope, I want this model to be slightly more grittier, so I don't really want to go for the whole glossy lens effect. So instead, I'm going to paint them white, and then I'll come back and go over those a little bit later on. To add a bit more interest to his weapon, I'm going to add some painted on stripes in there. Now, for starters, I'm going to use a nice dark brown and just paint diagonal lines all the way down the length of it. Once done that, then going back with a nice beigey kind of colour, and then do a very thin line just next to that brown line. So before we move on, the next bit is to get a very, very thin, very dark grey wash, almost black, and then use that as a pin wash to help define the shapes. So especially around the bottom of the armour, and that kind of very thin contact shade around the top of the strap around his leg. But once it dried, the lighting on his legs didn't look quite right. So I did go back and just touch that up again. Now, the next stage is to add a bit more contrast to that black armour. So this time I'm going back with that dark grey, but making it a little bit lighter, and this time adding a touch of blue into it. Now, you could use this colour as an edge highlight. I'm going to use it instead to kind of create the volumes, the volumetric lighting on it. Now, the idea is you take that base colour, and then as you get closer to the highlight, you add a little bit more white to the mix to make it a little bit lighter until you get to your uppermost highlight. Okay, so now it's time to create that urban warfare digicam onto the cape. So the first step to this is painting that cape in a mid grey. Now, you don't want the cape to look flat, So what I then did is I got a very thin black wash and just ran it from the bottom of the cape up to the top through those folds to add a bit more shadow into the depths of those folds. So Digicam is made up of lots and lots of little dots of different colours, and you can play with the colours to your heart's content to create different schemes. But for Digicam it tends to be either sort of blue and grey and white, or in this case grey, black and white in different tones. Now Digicam schemes tend to be kind of lots of little dots, but still following those kind of swirling patterns you might get in other camouflage schemes. So the first layer is going to be a light grey, and just kind of working from left to right and creating that swirly pattern all over the cape. Don't cover the entire thing, but little swirls all over it. Largely working from left to right. So not really up and down, but left to right. So the next layer is going to be a very dark grey. Don't go as far as black, but a dark grey. And then painting like lines from left to right. Now you can mix it up by creating like little branches coming off these lines, almost like you're painting little Christmas trees. Okay, so we've got the mid grey of the base layer. You've got a light grey kind of dotted all over it. You've got the little bands of dark grey. The next layer is a much lighter grey than what you used. Not white, but a much lighter grey. This one you use even more sparsely, especially over the dark grey areas, because it makes it contrast and it makes it pop more. Okay, so we're nearly there now. Now at this stage it can be worth getting that thin black wash and going over those folds in the cloak again, going over the pattern you've already painted and taking those tones right down into the shadows. Now the next layer is a very dark grey, almost black, but not quite. And then going over that dark grey you did before, but really thinning it out and make it little thin lines. Once again moving from left to right. Now the final layer to this is a very sparse dots of just off-white. Now keep these very sparse and spread out, and largely over that darker layer to make it really kind of pop out. So what we've created is a very simple yet a very effective urban camouflage digicam. Now you can play with the colours to any scheme you want, and if you're doing a whole squad of these, you can just do the layers at a time on each one and batch paint it fairly easily. Now if you're painting an urban camouflage scheme, they come in all sorts of different patterns. So you've got the digicam scheme like we've done today, or it could be splinter camouflage which comes in sort of straight angular lines, or it could be the swirly line type scheme. What's your favourite? Now if you found this video useful, then please hit the like button. It really helps out small channels like this. And if you want to learn more about painting different camouflage schemes, then I've created a whole playlist of different options for you to have a look at.